making the church look good for this. Do you think all that plays into this?
And I don't want to say like people are making things up or dishonest or anything. I think everybody is honestly engaging in the community.
Did you ever experience things while you were a Christian that you thought were miracles, or like you were like, hold on, I can't explain this? John, welcome to MythVision. Thanks to you, we actually have audio gear to actually do podcasts, in-person stuff, courses, you name it. But tell us about yourself. Who are you and where do you come from in terms of Christianity?
Yeah, I'm John Schenk. I was born in a Christian home, and my dad was a lay pastor, so a pastor that wasn't educated, with like MDiv and all that kind of stuff. Just was interested in the Bible and serving, and so became a pastor. And he was that for most of my life, something like, over 30 years. And so I grew up in the church bubble, going to church probably, I'd say 5 days a week, something like that. All sorts of different capacities, and yeah. I was born into the Nazarene denomination, so that's kind of an offshoot of the Methodist stream, I guess, if you want to say that, Wesleyan, non-Calvinist. I guess they call it the holiness movement.
You heretic.
Yeah, that'll ring some bells for some people, I think, but... and then I kind of stayed in that denomination, but there are variations within that denomination. So started out going to fairly normal, kind of middle of the road evangelical church when I was growing up. Then eventually out of college and stuff, moved to Seattle and went to a more charismatic kind of version of that, but they're still in the same denomination. And then another church that kind of followed that vein, but not really. So I've kind of seen the whole swath of everything. And had Calvinist friends and had lots of arguments with them and like all sorts of stuff, So
that's why I said heretic.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a Calvinist.
Yeah.
So me and you would have had our discussions.
Yes.
Did you ever experience things while you were a Christian that you thought were miracles, or like you were like, hold on, I can't explain this?
Yeah. That was mostly after college, being in a charismatic church where like they were praying for healing. And laying on of hands of like, strangers on the street and going to the hospital and praying for people and all that kind of stuff. We went to the hospital, me and the pastor, and laid hands on a guy that I didn't know at the time. But apparently he had been going to the church for a while and had a medical issue or something. And he said he couldn't like raise his arm above a certain height. We prayed for him, and then he could raise his arm above the height. So, something simple, but I'd never seen anything like that before.
So I got to ask you, because this really begs the question, could he raise his arm above that point?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying the guy didn't have a hard time doing it. I'm not even saying that he thought that he couldn't.
Yeah.
But when you look back at it now, with where you're going, we're going to gear towards some of the changes in your mind.
Yeah.
Would you attribute it to placebo? Would you think that there was real kicking in of endorphins and chemicals and the environment and the showmanship of the situation? Do you think that played a significant role in what you thought was a miracle at that time?
Yeah, I really do. And like placebo is a real thing. And I think it is more powerful than people get it credit for, especially if they haven't like done any research into studies on that kind of stuff. I later found out that the guy that we prayed for doesn't have all his mental faculties. So it would be hard for us to know if his report before the prayer completely true or, accurate. It would just be hard to know. So I don't have like any definitive proof that like something happened or something didn't happen, but it's pretty dubious either way.
Psychologically speaking, none of us are professionals on psychology, but I can imagine we have experience. And when I'm asking you these questions, I'm actually speaking from experience myself of things that I would probably say. But do you think that the whole system of the church doing this, it's almost set up for people to come? They want that person to come up and to say, imagine wanting attention. To get attention, they might come in and go, I just had a miracle happen. Look, the Lord did this for me. And then, everybody praised Bobby over here who got, a healing or whatever. Good job, Bobby, making the church look good for this. Do you think all that plays into this?
I think it is probably most of it. And I don't want to say like people are making things up or dishonest or anything. I think everybody is honestly engaging in the community with the stimuli of what's going on and all that stuff.
Right.
But I think naturally as humans, we just pick up on those things that we have to say and have to do to like fit in and be accepted and like all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a powerful, powerful force in those types of communities.
And I wonder if there's some psychology there of convincing in a community setting, of making and psyching yourself out to believe that something is the case that isn't.
Totally. Yeah. I think I've seen it. And I think a really good example is like worship and worship music. I've been a part of worship bands most of my life. I've been playing drums and guitar and all sorts of stuff. I've led worship. And part of the process, you pick the set, you pick the worship songs.
Right.
And you pick them so that you get a certain emotional response throughout the set. And you like set up the pastor and what he's going to say and stuff, or like you set up the altar call, or at the end of the service, you do a certain song or a certain type of vibe so that people can get into the spirit and stuff,
Yeah.
And it's, like, this is a strong word, but it's basically manipulation. You're manipulating people's feelings, and like you're doing it with lights and sometimes fog and all sorts of stuff.
I do it when I'm editing videos.
Exactly.
I want a sound effect. I want the music to touch you. I want you to be susceptible to my message so that you can try and follow where I'm trying to take you. And so part of it, you could look at it as a coercive act of manipulation in a negative way. You could look at it as like, we all do it to try and, persuade and whatnot. But your gift was music. How did that play out in your journey?
Yeah. So I'm at a church in Seattle, and I was specifically kind of called to that church to be on the worship team to help lead the music. And they have a worship leader. And so I'm working with them to, do everything that you'd have to do behind the scenes to make worship happen. Every week we would pick the set of songs. And because that community was kind of a charismatic kind of community, and they're like looking to like hear God's voice in the moment and stuff like that, the way we would do it is we would pray separately on like Monday, asking Holy Spirit or God to give us the song set. Then we would come together on like Wednesday and compare the sets, and then we would like choose from there.
Right.
So at the time, it wasn't like I wasn't thinking like I am now critically and like trying to figure out how I know things and stuff like that. But I started noticing that like our sets were never the same. And so later on, when I was evaluating things and deconstructing, I was like, that's a great test for hearing God's voice.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit, you guys obviously are spirit-filled type Christians, that God's Spirit would move you into what He wanted. He could foresee the future of what the music needed to be for the upcoming service, whatever day it may be, Wednesday, Sunday, whatever.
Yes.
You guys would go in your own paths. You're not doing what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did. You're not using each other's material. You're literally coming up on your own with the song. And when you do, it's almost like anything else that's random in the world that you're going on.
Yes.
You never really had the same. There
were like a couple of times when we had like one song in common, but it was hardly ever the same songs. And so like that's a really good test because it's falsifiable. You get results right away. You can see, okay, if we are hearing the same God, and if we are honestly approaching that practice.
Were you on?
Yes.
From your heart. You guys were so sincere.
Yes. Yeah. So, it could be that like maybe I'm not as good of hearing God as the worship leader. Like, I don't know. That's probably what I told myself at the time. There are differences in how people hear God's voice and what they hear from God. And if that's the case, like, what do we do with all these big questions where people are making very, consequential decisions about like dogma and doctrine and scripture interpretation and all that kind of stuff? It just kind of snowballs,
I'm fairly certain in our conversations that isn't the...
No, that's not the moment.
That wasn't the moment.
No.
We're going to have to get to that moment. So music is huge. Your parents, they're encouraging all of this. They're proud of you. They're happy. The community's patting you on the back. I mean, you're doing the right thing. Just make sure you don't question the wrong things or say the wrong things.
Right.
I know exactly what that's like.
Yeah.
Take us further into your story before we do get to that moment or thing that caused you to question.
Yeah, so I'm I do want to explain that coming from that like kind of Nazarene evangelical bubble of growing up in that one church and then going to college. And then it was a big shift going to Seattle because it's a different type of community that's really charismatic and spirit-filled. New experience for me. So I'm kind of learning for about, 4 years or so how to do that whole spirit-filled thing. And in the beginning, I'm like evaluating, is this real? Is this true? So I'm kind of naturally already starting like the beginnings of critical thinking about religion and God and deeply held beliefs. And
due to this radical changed environment.
Yes. But I come to accept it and adopt everything. The church there had a what they call the School of Supernatural Ministry. And so it was you'd meet for a couple hours every weekday, in the middle of the week between the services. And they had like a workbook and stuff for like all sorts of methods of how to like pray for people, how to prophesy, all these different things. And then we would like go on field trips and like go out in the streets and look for somebody who, we thought needed help, or maybe we had prayed beforehand. I got an impression of like a person in a red shirt, and so we'd go out and we find somebody in a red shirt and pray for them and stuff like that. So I look back on a lot of that and I kind of cringe a little bit,
I was waiting for you to say that,
because it was like, woo, we were really out there.
I can imagine looking back going, close your eye, get an 8-ball, shake it.
Yeah.
All right. She's going to wear a blouse. She's wearing a blouse. Let's go down, but there's good things you're doing to help. But there's also this like, I can't buy this stuff, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
What's next?
So I'm in that church for a while. I've kind of made a shift more to like, I'm less worried about like dogma and doctrine and the exact like, the Greek and the Hebrew of the Bible and all that kind of stuff. And I'm more focused on like, what is God doing now? What can God do for the people around me and my community and all that kind of stuff? And so I fully adopted that. When you get away from like the tradition, it becomes more about like people in good ways and in bad ways. And the good, we describe some of the good. We're, loving each other and being part of each other's lives and meeting new people and strangers and stuff like that, might need a kind word and stuff, those are great things. But then in the negative, like cults of personality form really easily. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what was going on there. But I didn't know at the time.
Your worship leader, your pastors, your youth group people, the people who were in charge.
Yep. The kind of the stream that I was flowing in, like they have like a word for it. They call it the fivefold ministry. And
I know exactly what you're. So I know where you're at now in your journey. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you heard of like Bethel Church in Reading.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It comes from all that kind of stuff and like Hillsong and things. So it just like really naturally sets things up for power to be a huge part of what's going on. And so I'm going through the church. I'm having a great time. I'm doing stuff. I'm meeting a lot of new people and good experiences. And then I find out from one of my roommates, one of the leaders in the church is doing like a weird manipulation game with him and another person that are both kind of like wanting to be one of the leadership positions, like volunteer for a leadership position. This other leader is like pitting them against each other with like half truths and like all this kind of stuff. I get that story from my roommate, so I verify it with the other person. Like, hey, have they been telling you this? Oh, they've been telling you that. That's different. That would make a problem for this. So I'm like seeing these power games like play out in front of me, and it just kind of like peels back the curtain on how everything works in the community. And that was, it felt like a betrayal for sure. And it was just like really strange. Like, okay, if God is choosing these leaders and the Spirit is supporting these leaders, why do we have to play any of these games?
It's starting right with what's right in front of you.
Yeah.
The doubt's setting in. And the first doubt is not, oh, therefore God doesn't exist. No. It is always, is this particular thing I'm part of really divine? Is this really of God?
Right.
Usually that's how it always starts for me, and the experiences I've read or heard and discussions I've had is that something starts to make you go and question. Yeah. And then now you're going, hold on, this looks so human.
Yes.
And not divine. So take us, as we're peeling back the onion, take us further into this.
Yeah, I can hear Christians commenting on the video now.
You can already predict. Prophet, you.
And like, this is stuff that I said to myself too, like you were saying, this isn't the community that I'm looking for.
That one's not of God, but
there's another
is.
one.
Yeah, there's another one.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. by that time, I had been splitting time between two churches. The Spirit-filled church was meeting on Sunday evenings, and I was going to another church on Sunday mornings. After all of that stuff kind of came out with manipulation and things, it was a couple weeks, and then I kind of stopped going to that church and just focused on this other one. During that time, I'm processing a ton of stuff, but one of the ways that I would process would be to write poetry, write songs, all sorts of stuff. So I'm writing some poetry. I had done it was around Christmas time, I'd done like a treatment of Luke when he describes Jesus' birth and stuff. Mm-hmm. I write that one, and then I'm like, ooh, this would be really cool if it was like a trilogy, and we had started with like Mary hearing from the angel. Here's, you're going to be pregnant with God, basically. And then like from Joseph's perspective, like I got to get my wife, my newly pregnant wife, to this other place for this census, and then finish with the first one that I wrote, which was, the birth and all that kind of shepherds and the angels and all that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to write this Mary poem, and I'm like realizing that I don't have a good picture, like a visual picture of who Mary was. So I start doing some research, famous last words. I start doing some research of like, who is Mary and like her surroundings and like Nazareth and Galilee and like all that kind of stuff at that time. What do we know? And I quickly find out that we know way less than I thought we should have in order to have all this confidence about who this person was and who Jesus is and the Bible and all that kind of stuff. I just remember thinking all I'm doing is just recycling that narrative. I'm not standing on anything that I actually know. And that was kind of the moment that it was like, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know any of these truths or faith foundations or dogmas or doctrines. I know the narrative. I know what people say about things, but I don't know what they're based on. I don't know, all that kind of stuff. So I just dove into learning about like history and history of religions and ancient Near East stuff and just all that kind of stuff. And then it just kind of went from there.
You discover there's not much to be said or known about Mary. I mean, maybe there's traditions later, but you weren't really focused on it as a Protestant. You're probably focused on like, what does the Bible say? Mm-hmm. And so now you realize there's not much that the Bible says.
Yeah.
Trust issues are already there. My question is, in light of your wanting to think with logic, think with intelligence, think with what facts are based on what we can know, mm-hmm. and that experience inside, the feeling of knowing Jesus, the feeling of, I have to turn my back on all this experience? You mean to tell me that wasn't true? Cognitive dissonance. I cannot think that wasn't true.
Yeah.
I imagine you had that happen. Yeah. So where did you go from I need Jesus, this is my whole life, mm-hmm. I am a caterpillar, mm-hmm. to turning into a butterfly and realizing, actually, that isn't true, and how do I explain all of this that I had in church and the miracles and the things? That's why I brought that up early on.
Yeah. I guess I was kind of a, progressive Christian or something for like a few months after that. Thinking like, okay, maybe the Bible is just myth. Maybe it's stories people just wrote down and nobody really knows, and that's okay. And we're all just kind of doing our best, to know God and stuff. And maybe there's something about how God relates to us where he can't just like, demonstrate things for us to answer all the questions and stuff. So like that, maybe that's what faith is. Just trust that you have the right answers or you're interpreting things the right way. And like, that's kind of how it should be, to just throw your faith on it, even faith on God, even if it's completely blind, maybe that's really what it is. And so for a few months, that's kind of how I was still going to that church and stuff, and not really, almost like I had kind of completely let go of the Bible, and if I knew anything about it, what it was saying, mm-hmm. and that kind of stuff. And then I didn't realize this though, but music was really the thing that was keeping me in the church. And I go out to lunch with my the worship leader at that church one day, and he just asked me point blank, I don't know exactly where this came from, but he's like, do you believe that Jesus is your savior? Maybe I'd mentioned something about like Bible is myth or something at some point, I don't know. But I was like, yeah, I think he is, but maybe in a different way than you do. And he says, okay, then you probably shouldn't be on the worship team anymore. And so like from that point, it was like, okay, so I'm just going to like go to church and not like be a part of the team and just like sing. And okay. So I tried that the next week, and it was the weirdest experience of my life, man. Like, I could see the worship from the other side. And I've been a part of worship teams for years and years and years and years and years. And I've been to like conferences where I would be just like one of the worshipers and stuff like that. But it's different when you see your own church that you've been like pouring yourself into for a while, when you see it from the other side. So after that service, I was just like, yeah, I don't know if I'm ever coming back here. So I didn't go to church, and that was probably 4-ish months or so before the pandemic happened.
Oh.
Yeah. So I have 4 months of like just not going, and there was probably some, anger and hurt there and stuff, and so I'm like kind of trying to deal with that and things.
Of course.
But then the pandemic happens, and then it's like, hey, you could go to church and like definitely catch the virus, or you could not go to church,
Yeah.
So I was like, well, that seems like a pretty simple choice to make, so I'm just not going to look for a new church or any of that kind of stuff. But the beauty of that is that it gave me the time I needed to be able to really evaluate things honestly. Because like we were talking before about how community dynamic and the Christian, like the pressure of the Christian community is real.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was outside of that pressure, and I could honestly ask myself questions that I never could if I had to go to church the next Sunday and face people having asked that question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the pandemic was beautiful for that, because I could just study as much as I wanted to. I could, like for a long time, I used the time on Sunday that I would go to church to just research stuff, watch YouTube videos, read books. Like that's when all the people that you feature on your channel, and then eventually your channel, really became important to me, because it was this source of information that I would have had to get from like a school or an online course or something like that, that I was just getting for free, and it was amazing, And like I like to talk with my friends and stuff about things that I watch and stuff, and like if I was part of that church still, like there's no talking to those people about that stuff.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You're not part of that's not part of the community. It's not part of the rules of their community. And you're not really part of their community as soon as you think the way that you think.
Yeah.
Do you remember any early things that really shocked you that just went, oh my gosh?
Yeah.
Why I never knew this.
Watching Dr. Josh Bowen on a couple of your interviews, and then on his own channel too with his wife Megan, his research into the documentary hypothesis and that kind of stuff, and then especially slavery. This is a huge social issue. It's a huge part of American history and all that kind of stuff. Like the Bible was used to justify everything that was going on in the South with chattel slavery and stuff. And I had heard some scuttlebutt of that, before from like apologists and things. And I heard the apologetic answers and stuff. And just seeing Josh like completely destroy that was super mind bending and opening in a lot of ways. And then just a lot of stuff with Bart Ehrman, how much we know about the authors of the different books, especially in the New Testament, and that one chart of manuscripts and what dates they come from. A bunch of apologists will say we have like 5,000 manuscripts of the New Testament. And then you find out that the majority of those 5,000 were like, I don't know, 700, 800 years after Jesus' life. Mm-hmm. And like maybe we have like 5 or 6 from like 100 years or less. So it's like, we don't know anything.
Well, we shouldn't have our overconfidence. Right?
Yeah.
I love what you said. So you came across our channel, MythVision. I know you came across Pine Creek. I know you came across other skeptics, and you found yourself in a different kind of environment. Where are you at with community now? I mean, what?
I still have friends that come from the Christian world and that kind of stuff. They're still Christians themselves, a lot of them, and I still hang out with them and stuff. And good relationship with my parents still. We don't really talk explicitly about this kind of stuff.
You mean to tell me?
Yeah.
My mom's the same.
Yeah. But we have a good relationship outside of all that. We can talk about sports and politics and movies and whatever. It's fine.
Yeah.
So that's great. But I am like looking for more community surrounding like this kind of stuff that you do, interviewing scholars and skeptics, and even interviewing Christians that are on the forefront of like archaeology and different things and have big claims, and like let's question those claims, and yeah. So Yeah.
John, I love it. I hope someone watching can relate. I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
I relate. I try to relate to everybody that I record, even if it is hard to at times. This one was not hard to relate to at all. And I hope that people will, consider some of the things you said there and do with it as they will. But I really do appreciate it. Any final words you'd like to tell people?
Yeah, I'd like to stress, if any Christians watch this, even people I used to know well, I haven't kept up with everybody, that kind of stuff. If you come across this, know that this comes from a really honest place, and I feel like I'm trying to just portray who I am and where I am now, and with no aim to convert anybody to atheism or anything, say anything like that. Right. Everybody's journey is their own, and this is just where I'm heading now.
I almost like to envision these conversations as just conversations of freedom. This is not a goal to coerce you to become like me, to be like me, but if you relate to what we're saying, at the very least, I feel like it can at least help with getting people to see, we create these tribalistic boundaries, rules, and set of things in our communities. We should change that. Because what you're doing is you're setting up a guy like John for exiting your community. I'll put it another way. If the people in the community weren't fake it till you make it, trying to control and run these little power games and lies and schemes, and there's probably a lot more that was going on in your community you don't even know about. If they weren't doing that, and you didn't see that, if it wasn't, hold on, your version of what, Son of God? Okay, we can't have you on our worship team. If it wasn't so much, honestly, BS in that way, I would imagine you wouldn't have the doubts. You wouldn't have gone down that skeptical path. Maybe eventually something would have gave, but I don't think you would have left Christianity overall. I mean, you'd have been still connected in some way through COVID, I imagine.
Yeah. It wouldn't have played out on the timeline that it did. Maybe it would have been later. I don't know. I think that the truths and the stuff that I think that we can know about history and about the Bible and stuff like that, I think those things eventually would have found their way to me.
Yeah.
They stand on their own in order to kind of break down the house of cards that is, modern day Christianity. But those little pebbles that I was describing, the set lists not matching and the manipulation in the church and then kind of being asked to leave the community, those are things that just nudged me to find those truths that, really broke everything down. If a Christian is saying to themselves well, this guy just got hurt by the church, and so that's why he left, I would agree with you in some sense. But at the same time, it didn't cause me to be like, I hate this church, I'm leaving, I hate God. Oh, this community isn't the right community, I'm going to find a different community. And then in that process, I started finding all these things that just made it not worth it to find another community, because I don't think these guys have the truth.
Right. You mean there's different competitive ideas that actually say this isn't the case?
Yeah.
It's like visiting a new country.
Yes.
And their culture is a radical shock to what you're used to.
Yeah.
Who's right?
Yeah, totally. And how do you know who's right?
And when you start asking those questions, even if you think you're right with Christianity to begin with, but if you actually start asking those questions, you just started your journey.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
I think you and me both would start leaning into looking at science and trying to evaluate what we can test, what we can observe, and start from the observable, testable stuff, and then work backwards. Because when you believed in wild things that you didn't need any evidence to believe, claims that people threw at you from a book in the ancient world that we don't even really know who's behind this stuff,
Anonymous authorship,
John, I hope we have more of these discussions in the future. If you enjoyed it, let us know what your favorite part of this deconversion story was with John. Tell us what your thoughts are about some of the things discussed. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where do you think we're going wrong, or where do you think we're going right? I'd like to hear your thoughts. But John, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for the platform.
Appreciate you.